I sat in my small kitchen in Kansas City, Missouri, staring at the mason jar on my counter. Inside were crumpled bills and loose change. Exactly $2,347. That was it. That was everything I had left in the world after 23 years of working as a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital. My name is Margaret, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 47 years old, a single mother of 2 teenage daughters, and that morning, as the autumn sunlight filtered through my faded curtains, I made a decision that would either save my family or destroy us completely. But let me tell you something. What I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's the story of every middle-aged woman who's ever looked at her bank account and felt that crushing weight in her chest. It's about the lies we tell ourselves, the shortcuts that promise heaven but deliver hell, and the one truth that changed everything for me. You see, 3 weeks before that morning, I had made the worst financial mistake of my life, and the consequences were about to catch up with me. 6 months earlier, everything seemed fine. Not great, but manageable. I was working double shifts at the hospital, and my daughters, Emily and Sarah, were doing well in school. Emily was 16, dreaming of college. Sarah was 14, obsessed with art and music. We weren't rich, but we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. Then my car broke down. The transmission was completely shot. The mechanic, a kind man named Joe who'd been fixing cars in our neighborhood for 30 years, gave me the bad news with apologetic eyes. "Maggie, I'm sorry, it's going to cost at least $3,500 to fix. And honestly, with how old this car is, you might be throwing good money after bad." I felt my stomach drop. Without a car, I couldn't get to work. Without work, I couldn't pay rent. It was a nightmare scenario that millions of Americans face every single day. That's when my neighbor, Patricia, knocked on my door. Patricia was in her early 50s, always dressed in expensive clothes, always talking about her latest investment. She lived 3 houses down in a home twice the size of mine, drove a new Mercedes, and seemed to have an endless supply of money. "Maggie, honey," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with a concerned expression, "I heard about your car trouble. Listen, I want to help you." I should have been suspicious. I should have asked more questions. But desperation has a way of making you deaf to warning signs. "There's this incredible investment opportunity," Patricia continued, pulling out her phone to show me screenshots of bank transfers and testimonials. "It's called quantum capital returns. You invest a small amount, and within 90 days you get triple your money back. Guaranteed." The word guaranteed should have been my first red flag. But all I could think about was that broken car, the mounting bills, and my daughter's worried faces. "How does it work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's eyes lit up. "It's cryptocurrency mining combined with Forex trading. The company has advanced AI algorithms that predict market movements. They can't lose, Maggie. I've already made $45,000 in 6 months. Look." She showed me her account statement. The numbers seemed real. The website looked professional. There were testimonials from people just like me, single mothers, struggling families, hardworking Americans who finally caught a break. "How much do I need to invest?" I asked. "The minimum is $2,000, but honestly, the more you put in, the more you get back. I started with $5,000 and look at me now." I did look at her. I looked at her expensive purse, her diamond earrings, her confident smile. I wanted what she had. I wanted to stop worrying about money. I wanted to give my daughters the life they deserved. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind racing. I had exactly $3,200 in my savings account. It had taken me 3 years to save that much, setting aside $20 or $30 whenever I could. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for the girls' education, for a better future. But what if Patricia was right? What if this was the opportunity I'd been waiting for? 90 days, triple my money. I could fix the car, catch up on bills, and still have money left over. The next morning, I made the transfer, $20,500. I kept $700 for immediate expenses and sent the rest to Quantum Capital Returns. The confirmation email arrived within minutes, promising me $7,500 in exactly 90 days. For the first 2 weeks, I checked my account every single day. The dashboard showed my investment growing in real time. Day 1, $2,547. Day 5, $2,900. Day 12, $3,456. It felt real. It felt like magic. Patricia and I would talk over coffee, celebrating our good fortune. She introduced me to others in the neighborhood who were also investing. There was Robert, a retired postal worker who'd put in $10,000. There was Chen, who worked at the local grocery store and invested his entire tax refund. There was Linda, a substitute teacher who convinced her elderly mother to invest her Social Security check. We were all going to be rich. We were all going to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck trap that had defined our lives. But then, on day 17, something strange happened. I tried to log into my account and couldn't. The website was down. I called Patricia in a panic. "Oh, don't worry," she said calmly. "They're just doing system maintenance. It happens all the time. It'll be back up tomorrow." It won't be back up tomorrow, or the day after that, or the day after that. By day 23, the website had completely disappeared. The phone number went to a disconnected line. The email address bounced back. The testimonials, the screenshots, the professional-looking website, all of it vanished like smoke in the wind. I had been scammed. We had all been scammed. And my $2,500 was gone forever. I sat at that kitchen table and cried harder than I'd cried since my divorce, 7 years earlier. Not just for the money, though that was devastating enough. I cried because I'd been so foolish. I cried because I'd fallen for the oldest trick in the book. I cried because I had to figure out how to feed my daughters and pay rent with $700 to my name. Patricia stopped returning my calls. I later found out she was actually a recruiter for the scam, earning commissions for every person she brought in. She moved away 3 weeks later, probably to start the same scheme in another city, preying on another group of desperate, hopeful people. That's how I ended up staring at that mason jar with $2,140, trying to figure out how to survive. The morning after I counted that money, I had to tell my daughters the truth. We were sitting at breakfast, cereal with water instead of milk because I couldn't afford groceries, and I saw Emily watching me with those knowing eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked quietly. I couldn't lie to them anymore, so I told them everything. The scam, the lost savings, the fact that we might have to move out of our house because I couldn't make rent. Sarah, my 14-year-old, started crying immediately, but Emily, my oldest, just sat there in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, you can't give up. You're the strongest person I know. If anyone can figure this out, it's you." Her words broke something open inside me. She was right. I couldn't give up. Not for myself, but for them. That afternoon, I went to see Mrs. Henderson. She lived 2 blocks away in a small house that she'd owned for 40 years. She was 73 years old, sharp as a tack, and known in the neighborhood as someone who gave good advice. I told her everything. The scam, desperation, the shame I felt for being so stupid. Mrs. Henderson listened without interrupting. When I finished, she poured a cup of tea on me and sat down across from me with a serious expression. "Maggie," she said, "you're not stupid, you're desperate. And desperate people make desperate decisions. But you want to know what really happened? You tried to buy what you didn't earn." I felt defensive immediately. I was trying to provide for my family. "No," she said firmly. "You were trying to get rich quick. There's a difference. Providing for your family means working hard, saving carefully, and building slowly. Getting rich quick means gambling with money you can't afford to lose." Her words stung because they were true. I had wanted the shortcut. I had wanted a miracle. I had wanted to skip all the hard work and sacrifice that real success requires. "So what do I do now?" I asked, my voice breaking. Mrs. Henderson smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Now you do what every successful person in history has done. You start small, you start smart, and you start right. She told me about her own story, how she'd started with nothing in 1972, a young black woman in Kansas City with no education and no opportunities, how she'd cleaned houses for 3&D, hour and saved every single penny, how she'd bought her first property at age 30 with $2,000 in cash, a tiny duplex in a rough neighborhood. Everyone told me I was crazy, she said, but I fixed it up myself, painted it, repaired the roof, made it livable. Then I rented out one side and lived in the other. The rent from that one unit covered my mortgage and gave me a little extra. Then what? I asked, completely absorbed in her story. Then I saved that extra money, every single month, for 3 years, and I bought another property, a small house that needed work, fixed it up, rented it out, kept saving, kept buying, slowly, patiently, one property at a time. How many do you own now? I asked. 17 properties, she said calmly, and they're all paid off. The rental income from those properties is more than most people make working full-time. But it took me 40 years, Maggie, 40 years of sacrifice and patience and doing things the right way. I felt overwhelmed. Mrs. Henderson, I don't have 40 years. I have $2,847.30 days until rent is due. She looked at me seriously. Then we better get started right now. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson taught me the first lesson on real wealth building. You don't need a lot of money to start. You need the right knowledge and the willingness to work. What can you do? She asked me. What skills do you have? I'm a nurse, I said. I know medical care, patient support, health education. Good, what else? I can cook. I learned from my grandmother. Everyone says I make the best comfort food. Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up. There's your answer. You're sitting on a gold mine, and you don't even know it. She explained her plan. Kansas City had a growing population of elderly people who needed care, but couldn't afford full-time nursing homes. They needed someone who could check on them, help with medication, cook healthy meals, and provide companionship, someone exactly like me. But I already work full-time at the hospital, I protested. Then you start small, weekends, evenings, 1 or 2 clients. You build slowly. That night I created a simple flyer on my computer. Compassionate Care by Maggie. Medical support, meal preparation, and companionship for seniors. Affordable rates. Experienced RN. I printed 50 copies at the library and spent the next Saturday walking through every neighborhood within 5 miles, putting flyers in mailboxes and on community boards. By Monday, I had 3 phone calls. By Wednesday, I had my first client. Her name was Dorothy, an 81-year-old widow living alone in a modest house in Midtown. Her children lived in other states and worried about her constantly. She needed someone to visit 3 times a week, help her with medications, cook healthy meals, and just talk. Dorothy offered me $150 per week for 6 hours of work, 3 2-hour visits. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That first visit changed my life, not because of the money, but because of what I learned. Dorothy had been a school teacher for 42 years. She'd never made more than $35,000 a year, even at the peak of her career. But she owned her house outright, had $380,000 in savings, and lived comfortably on her pension and Social Security. How? I asked her during one of our conversations. How did you save so much on a teacher's salary? Dorothy smiled. I lived below my means, dear. Not at my means, below them. Every month I paid for myself first. 10% of every paycheck went directly into savings before I paid any bills. I drove used cars. I cooked at home. I didn't buy things I couldn't afford. And I invested in index funds, slowly and consistently, for 40 years. She showed me her investment statements. She started with just $50 a month in 1975. By 2020, with compound interest and consistent contributions, that had grown to $380,000. The secret, she said, isn't making a lot of money. It's keeping what you make and letting time do the work. I thought about all the money I'd wasted over the years, the credit card debt, the unnecessary purchases, the lottery tickets I'd bought were hoping for a miracle. If I had saved just $50 a month for the past 20 years, I would have had over $15,000, even without any investment returns. I had been my own worst enemy. That realization hurt, but it also gave me hope. Because if I had been the problem, I could also have the solution. Within 2 months, I had 5 clients, then 8, then 12. I was working at the hospital during the day and visiting my clients in the evenings and on weekends. I was exhausted, but for the first time in years, I had hope. Every single dollar I earned from my care business went into 3 places. First, an emergency fund. Second, paying off my credit cards. Third, a small investment account that I opened with just $25. Mrs. Henderson helped me create a business plan. Not a complicated one, just a simple document that outlined my goals, my target market, my services, and my pricing. Write it down, she told me. If you don't write it down, it's just a dream. When you write it down, it becomes a plan. My goal was simple: build a legitimate elder care business that could eventually replace my hospital income and give me financial security. But just when things started looking up, I hit another obstacle. One of my clients, Mr. Patterson, fell into his bathroom while I was visiting. He broke his hip and had to be hospitalized. His daughter, who lived in California, blamed me. She threatened to sue me for negligence. I was devastated. I hadn't done anything wrong. Mr. Patterson had fallen before I arrived, and I had actually called 911 and potentially saved his life by getting him help quickly. But the threat of a lawsuit terrified me. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have legal protection. One lawsuit could destroy everything I'd built. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, crying again. It felt like every time I took 1 step forward, life pushed me 2 steps back. But then I remembered something Mrs. Henderson had told me. Success isn't about never falling down. It's about always getting back up. The next morning, I called a lawyer who offered free consultations. She explained that I needed to form a legal business entity, get liability insurance, and have proper contracts with all my clients. It's going to cost about $2,500 to set everything up properly, she said. I looked at my savings. I had $2,800 in my emergency fund. Using more than half of it felt terrifying, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I paid for the incorporation, the insurance, and the contracts. Within 3 weeks, I had transformed my informal side hustle into a legitimate business, Margaret's Compassionate Care, LLC. Mr. Patterson's daughter never filed the lawsuit. The hospital found video footage showing that her father had fallen before I arrived. But the scare had taught me an invaluable lesson. If you're going to build something real, you have to do it right. No shortcuts, no cutting corners, no gambling. 6 months into my business, something unexpected happened. One of my clients, Mrs. Chen, mentioned that her daughter was looking for the same kind of service for her mother-in-law in another part of the city. "Do you know anyone who does what you do?" Mrs. Chen asked. That's when the idea hit me. What if I didn't just offer the service myself? What if I created a network of caregivers? I started reaching out to other nurses I knew from the hospital, people who were looking for extra income, who had the skills and compassion to do this work. I offered them a simple deal. I would find clients, handle all the administrative work, provide insurance and legal protection, and they would provide the care. We would split the income 60-40. Within 3 months, I had recruited 7 caregivers. Within 6 months, we were serving 42 clients across Kansas City. I wasn't working harder. I was working smarter. Instead of being limited by my own time, I was building a system that could scale. But success brought new challenges. I was managing schedules, handling payments, dealing with client complaints, and trying to maintain quality control. I was overwhelmed and made mistakes. That's when I met James at a small business workshop at the local community college. James was a retired accountant who volunteered his time helping new entrepreneurs. He looked at my business records and shook his head. "Margaret, you're losing money and you don't even know it," he said bluntly. "What do you mean? We're bringing in over $8,000 a month now." "And how much of that is profit?" I hesitated. I honestly didn't know. I was just depositing checks and paying bills and hoping there was money left over. James spent the next 3 hours teaching me basic business accounting. He showed me how to track income and expenses, how to calculate profit margins, how to identify waste, and how to price my services correctly. It turned out I was undercharging by about 30%. I was also spending money on things I didn't need: expensive software, unnecessary office supplies, premium insurance coverage when basic would have sufficed. "You're treating this like a charity, not a business," James said. "If you want this to succeed, you have to respect the numbers." He helped me create a simple spreadsheet system to track everything. Within 1 month, I could see exactly where every dollar was coming from and where it was going. My actual profit was only about $200 per month, far less than I thought. But now that I knew the truth, I could fix it. I raised my prices by 20%, which I was terrified would drive clients away. Instead, I lost only 2 clients, and the increased revenue from the others was more than made up for it. Turns out people value quality care and are willing to pay for it. I renegotiated my insurance, saving $200 per month. I switched to free software for scheduling and billing. I stopped buying things I didn't need. Within 3 months, my profit had doubled to $12,400 per month. Within 6 months, it was $4,000. But here's what really changed everything. I finally understood that business success wasn't about working hard. It was about making smarter decisions with information. Dorothy, my first client, noticed the change in me. "You're becoming a real businesswoman," she said proudly one afternoon. "I'm trying," I replied, "but honestly, I feel like I'm making it up as I go." She laughed. "That's exactly what every successful business owner does. The difference is, some people make it up and hope for the best. Others make it up and learn from what works." Her words stuck to me. I started reading everything I could about business management, marketing, customer service, and financial planning. Not expensive courses or complicated programs, just books from the library and free resources online. I learned about customer retention and realized that keeping existing clients was far more valuable than constantly searching for new ones. I started sending birthday cards, making follow-up calls, and genuinely caring about the people we served. I learned about employee motivation and realized that my caregivers weren't just workers, they were partners. I started sharing more of the profits with them, offering bonuses for excellent service, and creating a culture where they felt valued. I learned about marketing and realized that word of mouth was my most powerful tool. Every satisfied client told 2 or 3 others. Every happy caregiver referred to friends who wanted to join our team. But the most important thing I learned was this: real wealth isn't about making a lot of money once. It's about creating a system that generates income consistently over time. Mrs. Henderson had been right all along. Slow and steady, smart and careful, no shortcuts. 2 years after I'd lost that $2,500 to a scam, I sat in my kitchen looking at a very different set of numbers. Margaret's Compassionate Care now serves 127 clients across 3 counties. We employed 23 caregivers. Our monthly revenue was $62,000, with a profit margin of about 30%, meaning I personally made about $18,000 per month. But more importantly, I had learned to manage money properly. I had 6 months of expenses saved in an emergency fund. I had no credit card debt. I was maxing out my IRA contributions. I had even started a college fund for Emily and Sarah. Emily was now in her first year at the University of Missouri, studying nursing like her mother. Sarah was thriving in high school, already talking about art school. Neither of them had to worry about student loans because I could finally afford to help them. But the journey to get here hadn't been easy, and it almost ended several times. The biggest crisis came in year one when a large home care franchise opened in Kansas City. They had massive marketing budgets, corporate backing, and name recognition. They started aggressively recruiting my caregivers with promises of higher pay and better benefits. I lost 5 of my best people in 1 month. I panicked. I considered taking out a loan to match their salaries. I considered giving up entirely. Instead, I did something different. I called a meeting with all my remaining caregivers and asked them honestly, "Why are you still here? What would make you want to stay?" Their answers surprised me. It wasn't just about money. They stayed because they felt valued, because they had flexibility, because they were part of something meaningful, because in my company, they weren't just employees, they were respected professionals. That's when I realized my competitive advantage wasn't being bigger or having more money. It was being better, treating people better, serving clients better, building real relationships. I couldn't match the franchise's salaries dollar for dollar, but I could offer profit sharing. I could offer flexible schedules. I could offer a workplace where people were seen and heard. Within 6 months, 3 of the caregivers who had left came back. The franchise, it turned out, treated their workers like cogs in a machine. We treated ours like family. But the real test came when I had to make the hardest decision of my business life. One of our longest-serving caregivers, Amanda, was caught stealing from a client. Not a lot, just $40 from a purse. But it was theft, plain and simple. Amanda was a single mother of 3. She was struggling financially. She was a good person who'd made a terrible mistake. And she was sobbing in my office, begging for another chance. Part of me wanted to look the other way, to make excuses, to give her another chance because I understood desperation. But I thought about that moment 2 years earlier when I'd lost $2,500 to a scam. I thought about Patricia, who'd preyed on desperate people like me. I thought about the shortcuts and the lies and the damage they caused, and I knew what I had to do. "Amanda," I said gently, "I understand why you did it, but I can't keep you. If I let this go, I'm telling every other caregiver that stealing is okay as long as you're desperate. I'm telling our clients that they can't trust us. I'm destroying everything we've built." She left that day, and I cried after she was gone. But I knew it was the right decision, because a business built on integrity can survive anything. A business built on compromises and shortcuts will eventually collapse. That decision will cost me in the short term. Amanda told her friends I was heartless. Some people in the community criticized me, but our clients noticed. Our caregivers noticed. They saw that I was serious about doing things right, no matter how hard it was. And something beautiful happened. Our reputation has grown. Clients trusted us more. Caregivers respected us more. We didn't become successful despite our integrity. We became successful because of it. The moment that defined everything happened on a cold March morning in my 3rd year of business. I received a call from the adult daughter of one of our clients, Mrs. Morrison. Mrs. Morrison was 92 years old, had no other family, and had been with us for 18 months. "Margaret," the daughter said, her voice breaking, "my mother passed away last night, peacefully in her sleep. But before she died, she asked me to make sure you received something." 2 days later, I attended Mrs. Morrison's memorial service. Afterward, the daughter handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Mrs. Morrison and a check for $50,000. My hands trembled as I read her words. "Dear Margaret, you gave me something far more valuable than care. You gave me dignity. You gave me friendship. You gave me the feeling that my life still mattered. I have no family to leave my savings to. My daughter is well provided for. So I'm leaving this to you with one condition. Use it to help other women like yourself. Women who are struggling. Women who are desperate. Women who just need a chance. Build something beautiful with it. Build something real. You've already proven you know how. With love and gratitude, Eleanor Morrison. I sat in my car and sobbed, not because of the money, though $50,000 was life-changing, but because Mrs. Morrison had seen in me that I had struggled to see in myself, the ability to build something meaningful through honest work and genuine care. That money became the seed capital for the next phase of my business. But this time, I didn't just think about profits. I thought about purpose. I created a training program for women who wanted to become caregivers but couldn't afford certification courses. I covered the costs of their training and helped them get licensed. I started a microloan program for employees who needed help with emergency car repairs, medical bills, and unexpected expenses. They could borrow up to $1,000 at zero interest and pay it back over 6 months. No credit checks, no penalties, just help when they need it most. I partnered with local community colleges to create a pipeline of trained caregivers, ensuring that students who graduated had jobs waiting for them. And I finally did something I'd been putting off. I went back to school myself. I enrolled in an online MBA program, studying nights and weekends, learning everything I could about business management, leadership, and strategic planning. It was exhausting. There were nights when I wanted to quit, mornings when I was so tired I could barely function, moments when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But every time I doubted, I thought about that mason jar with 2,340 seminars. I thought about how close I'd come to giving up, and I thought about Mrs. Morrison's letter. Build something beautiful. 5 years after I lost everything to a scam, Margaret's compassionate care had grown into something I never imagined possible. We now serve over 400 clients across 5 counties in Missouri and Kansas. We employed 87 caregivers, 90% of whom were women. Our annual revenue exceeded $2.8 million, but the numbers that mattered most to me weren't about money. We had helped 32 women get caregiver certification who couldn't have afforded it otherwise. We had provided emergency loans to 68 employees, and 95% of them had paid us back. We had created a workplace where people felt valued, respected, and empowered, and we had never once cut corners or compromised our integrity. My daughters grew up watching this journey. They saw me fail. They saw me crying. They saw me struggle. But they also saw me get back up repeatedly. Emily graduated from nursing school and joined our company, bringing fresh ideas and energy. Sarah decided to study business marketing, inspired by watching our company grow. "Mom," Emily said to me one evening as we reviewed client satisfaction surveys, "do you ever think about what would have happened if that scam hadn't happened? If you'd never lost that money?" I thought about her question carefully. Honestly, I'd probably still be working at the hospital, living paycheck to paycheck, dreaming about a better life, but being too scared to actually build it. "So you're glad it happened?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not glad I was scammed. I'm not glad I suffered. But I'm grateful for what it taught me, that there are no shortcuts, that real success comes from doing things right, even when it's hard. That integrity matters more than money." The truth is, losing that $2,500 was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I found. My own strength, my own capability, my own worth. I had spent so many years feeling like a victim of my divorce, of financial stress, of circumstances beyond my control. The scam was just another example of bad things happening to me. But building this business taught me that I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And survivors don't just endure, they transform. Mrs. Henderson, who had become my mentor and friend, came to visit one afternoon. She was 80 years old now, still sharp, still wise, still living in that modest house surrounded by 17 paid-off properties. "I'm proud of you, Maggie," she said as we sat on my back porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the sunset. "You did what most people never do. You learned from your mistakes instead of repeating them." "I learned from you," I replied. "You showed me that it was possible." She shook her head. I showed you the path. You chose to walk it. There's a big difference. I've known hundreds of people who saw the path and never took a single step. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said something I'll never forget. You know what the real difference is between rich people and poor people, Maggie? It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's not even opportunity. It's patience. Rich people are willing to delay gratification, to plant seeds and wait for them to grow, to do boring, unglamorous work for years before seeing results. Poor people want everything now. They want the shortcut, the quick fix, the miracle. I thought about Patricia and quantum capital returns, about all the people in my neighborhood who'd lost money to that scam, about the lottery tickets, the get-rich-quick schemes, the promises of easy money that never came true. We're taught to want instant results, I said. Fast food, fast fashion, fast wealth. Nobody talks about the beauty of slow growth. Mrs. Henderson smiled. That's because slow growth doesn't make good television, but it makes great lives. In my 6th year of business, I faced the biggest temptation of my life. A large healthcare corporation approached me with an offer to buy Margaret's Compassionate Care for $3.2 million. $3.2 million. It was more money than I could comprehend. It was generational wealth. It was security for my daughters, for my future grandchildren, for me. The CEO flew in from Boston to meet with me personally. He was in his 50s, impeccably dressed, speaking the language of synergies and market opportunities and strategic growth. Margaret, he said over lunch at an expensive downtown restaurant, you've built something remarkable here. Our company has the resources to take what you've created and scale it nationally. We're talking about hundreds of locations, thousands of employees, tens of millions in revenue. What happens to my current employees? I asked. We'll retain the high performers, he said smoothly. The rest will be transitioned out. We'll bring in our own management structure, our own systems. You'd stay as a consultant for 2 years, of course. Very generous compensation package. And the clients? We'll honor existing contracts, but we'll need to implement our standardized pricing and service models going forward. I went home that night with the letter from the offer burning a hole in my briefcase. $3.2 million, half up front, half over 2 years. I could retire, I could travel, I could live the rest of my life without financial worry. I called a family meeting with Emily and Sarah. I laid out the offer on our kitchen table, the same table where I'd once counted 2,347 hours and wondered how I'd survive. What do you think? I asked them. Emily, always the thoughtful one, spoke first. Mom, it's a lot of money, life-changing money, but what happens to our employees? What happens to our clients? They said they'd retain high performers. What about the others? What about Maria, who's been with us from the beginning but struggles with English? What about Janet, who's in her 60s and would never be hired by a corporate company? Sarah, my artist daughter, added, and what about Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez and all the clients who trust us because we actually care about them? Will they get that same care from a corporate system? I already knew the answer. They wouldn't. The company would maximize profits by minimizing costs. Employees would become numbers. Clients would become revenue streams. You've built something beautiful here, Mom, Emily said softly. Don't let them turn it into something ugly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Mrs. Morrison's letter. Build something beautiful with it. I thought about every employee who depended on us for their livelihood, every client who trusted us with their care, every lesson I'd learned about integrity and patience and doing things right. And I thought about that moment 7 years earlier when Patricia had convinced me to invest in quantum capital returns, when I'd been so desperate for a shortcut that I'd betrayed my own values. The next morning, I called the CEO. Thank you for the offer, I said, but I'm not selling. There was a long pause. Margaret, I don't think you understand. This is $3.2 million. Most people in your position would jump at this opportunity. I understand exactly what it is, I replied calmly. It's a lot of money, but my company isn't for sale, not at any price. Can I ask why? What's your concern? My concern is that you'll turn something built on relationships into something built on spreadsheets. You'll replace people who care with people who are efficient. And in the process, you'll destroy everything that makes this business worth anything. He tried to negotiate, offered $4 million, then $4.5 million. But I'd already made my decision. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and cried. Not tears of regret, but tears of relief. Because I'd just passed the biggest test of my life. I'd chosen purpose over profit, people over money, integrity over opportunity, and it felt like the rightest thing I'd ever done. That decision changed everything, but not in the way you might think. Word spread through the elder care community that I'd turned down millions to protect my employees and clients. We started getting calls from families specifically because of our values. Caregivers from other companies reached out, wanting to work for someone who wouldn't sell them out. Within 18 months, we'll grow to 127 employees and 612 clients. Our revenue hit $4.3 million annually, and my personal income exceeded what I would have made from the buyout, except now I still own the business. But more importantly, I had something money couldn't buy: the respect of my daughters, the loyalty of my team, and the trust of hundreds of families who knew we'd never compromise their care for corporate profits. I started speaking at community colleges and small business workshops, sharing my story, not to brag, but to teach, because I'd learned lessons that had cost me years of struggle, and I wanted to save others from making the same mistakes. Here's what I told them. First lesson: there are no shortcuts to real success. Every scam, every get-rich-quick scheme, every guaranteed investment that promises easy money is built on a lie. Real wealth takes time, patience, and consistent effort. It's boring, it's slow, it's unglamorous, but it works. Second lesson: your character is your greatest asset. You can lose money and make it back. You can lose opportunities and find new ones. But once you lose your integrity, you've lost something you can never fully recover. Every decision you make either builds or erodes your character. Third lesson: systems beat effort. Working harder isn't the answer. Working smarter is. Build systems that can operate without you. Create processes that scale. Invest in people and infrastructure, not just in yourself. Fourth lesson: your biggest competition isn't other companies. It's your own fear and impatience. Every time you choose the shortcut over the right path, you're competing against your future self. Every time you compromise your values for short-term gain, you're sabotaging your long-term success. Fifth lesson: true wealth is measured in options, not in dollars. Money in the bank is nice. But real wealth is having the freedom to make decisions based on values instead of desperation. It's being able to say no to $4.5 million because saying yes would betray everything you believe in. Sixth lesson: help others climb after you. Success that benefits only you is hollow. Real success creates opportunities for others. It lifts communities. It changes lives beyond your own. At one workshop, a woman in her 50s approached me afterward. She looked tired, stressed, defeated, exactly how I'd looked 7 years earlier. "I don't have a business," she said. "I'm just a checkout clerk at Walmart. Your story doesn't apply to me." I took her hands. "Listen to me. 7 years ago, I was a nurse with $2,347 to my name and no idea how I'd pay rent. I'm not special. I'm not lucky. I don't have any secret gift. I just made different choices. And you can too. But where do I start?" Start by paying yourself first, even if it's just $10 a week. Put it somewhere you can't easily access. Then find one skill you have that someone else needs. Maybe it's cleaning houses, maybe it's tutoring kids, maybe it's baking cookies. Take that skill and offer it to one person, just one. Then do an excellent job. Let them tell someone else. Then you have 2 clients, then 3, then 5. It doesn't have to be fast, it just has to be consistent. She was crying now. But what if I fail? Then you'll fail, and you'll learn something, and you'll try again. That's the only difference between people who succeed and people who don't. Successful people fail more times than unsuccessful people even try. 6 months later, she emailed me. She'd started a house cleaning business with 1 client. Now she was 12. She was making an extra $800 a month. She'd paid off her credit cards. She'd started an emergency fund. "I'm not rich yet," she wrote, "but for the first time in my adult life, I'm not terrified of the future. Thank you for showing me it was possible." That email meant more to me than any amount of money ever could. On the 7-year anniversary of losing my savings to that scam, I did something I'd been planning for months. I rented a community center in the neighborhood where I'd grown up, the same neighborhood where Patricia had convinced me to invest in quantum capital returns. I invited every person I could find who'd been scammed that same year. 17 people showed up. Some I knew, some I'd never met. But we all shared the same wound. "I'm not here to talk about what we lost," I began. "I'm here to talk about what we learned. Because that scam didn't just take our money, it taught us something valuable about ourselves." I went around the room, asking each person to share their story. What has happened since? How had they recovered? What had they learned? Robert, the retired postal worker, had started a small lawn care business. He now had 30 regular clients and was making more than his pension. Chen had gone back to school and become a licensed electrician. He was earning twice what he'd made at the grocery store. Linda had written a book about financial literacy and was teaching workshops at senior centers across Kansas City. Not everyone had recovered financially. Some were still struggling. But every single person in that room had learned something about themselves, about money, about what really matters. "Here's what I want you to understand," I said. "That scam didn't happen to us because we were stupid. It happened because we were desperate and hopeful and human. And those aren't bad qualities. What matters is what we did after we got knocked down." I shared my own journey. The mason jar with 2,347. The terrifying decision to start over. The slow, unglamorous climb. The temptation of the buyout offers. The choice to build something meaningful instead of something profitable. "I'm not saying money doesn't matter," I continued. "Money matters. It pays rent. It feeds children. It creates security. But money isn't the point. The point is what you become in the process of earning it. The person I am today is someone I'm proud of. The person I was 7 years ago was lost and desperate and willing to gamble on lies. I wouldn't go back for anything." After the meeting, an older man approached me. He hadn't shared during the group discussion, just sat quietly in the back. "I lost my entire retirement to a different scam," he said. 28 years of savings, gone in 3 weeks. I've been so angry, so bitter. But listening to your story, I realized something. I've been using what happened as an excuse to stay stuck. I told myself I was too old, too broke, too betrayed to start over. But I'm only 71. I might have another 20 years, and I can either spend them angry about the past or building something new. He paused, his eyes wet with tears. "Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late." 3 months later, he started a woodworking business making custom furniture. Last I heard, he had a 6-month waiting list for his pieces. 10 years after that devastating morning when I counted $2,147 in a mason jar, I stood in front of a very different audience. The Kansas City Chamber of Commerce had invited me to speak at their annual Small Business Awards ceremony. Margaret's Compassionate Care has been nominated for the Ethics in Business Award. My daughters sat in the front row. Emily was now our director of operations, applying everything she'd learned in nursing school to improve our care protocols. Sarah had joined us as marketing director, bringing creativity and strategy to how we told our story. Mrs. Henderson was there, too, sitting next to them, her face glowing with pride. When they announced that we'd won, I walked to the stage with trembling legs, not because I was nervous about public speaking, but because I couldn't quite believe this was real. 10 years ago, I began, I lost $2,500 to a scam. It was every penny I had saved. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd failed my daughters, failed myself, failed everything I'd worked for. I paused, looking out at the hundreds of faces in the audience. But that moment of absolute rock bottom became the foundation for everything I've built since. Because when you have nothing to lose, you're finally free to do things right. When you've been betrayed by shortcuts, you finally appreciate the value of the long path. When you've seen what happens when you compromise your values, you finally understand why integrity matters. I held the award. This doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every person who's ever been knocked down and chose to get back up. It belongs to every middle-aged woman who's ever looked at her bank account and wondered how she'd survive. It belongs to every person who's ever been told they're too old, too broke, too late to start something new. My voice cracked with emotion. You're not too old, you're not too broke. It's not too late. You just have to be willing to do the work, the real work, honest work, the slow, patient, unglamorous work that actually builds something lasting. The applause was deafening, but I barely heard it, because in that moment I was thinking about the woman I'd been 10 years ago, the desperate, terrified, foolish woman who'd gambled her savings. On a lie, I wished I could go back and hug her, tell her it would be okay, tell her the pain she was feeling would transform into something beautiful. Tell her that the worst day of her life was actually the beginning of the best chapter. But I couldn't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, carrying our scars and our lessons, building something better with what we've learned. Today, Margaret's Compassionate Care serves over 800 clients across Missouri, Kansas, and now expanding into Oklahoma. We employ 143 caregivers, almost all of them women, many of them single mothers or women over 50 who'd been told they were too old for the job market. Our annual revenue is approaching $7 million, but that number doesn't capture what we've really built. We've provided free training to 97 women who couldn't afford caregiver certification. We've given emergency loans to over 200 employees. We've created a workplace culture where people are valued, respected, and empowered. We've cared for thousands of elderly people with dignity and compassion, allowing them to age in their homes, surrounded by familiar comfort rather than in sterile institutions. And we've done it all without ever compromising our integrity. Not once, not ever. My personal net worth is now over $2.3 million, though I own my home outright. I have no debt. I have college funds for my future grandchildren. I have investments that will ensure my retirement is secure. But you know what I'm most proud of? It's not the money. It's that I can look at myself in the mirror and like the woman looking back. It's that my daughters grew up watching someone fail and get back up. It's that 143 families depend on the business I built from nothing. It's that hundreds of elderly people receive better care because I chose to do things right. Last month, I returned to that same house where Mrs. Henderson had first told me her story 13 years ago. She's 83 now, still living independently, still sharp as ever. We sat on her porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd taken that buyout?" she asked me. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I think about the money I left on the table, the security it would have provided, the ease of just walking away." "Any regrets?" I thought about my question carefully. "None." Because I learned something that day that's worth more than any amount of money. I learned that some things can't be bought or sold. Some things you build with your own hands, your own heart, your own integrity. And those things? They're priceless. Mrs. Henderson smiled. You know what the real treasure is, Maggie? It's not the business you built, it's who you became in the process of building it. She was right. 10 years ago, I was a victim of circumstances, of scammers, of my own desperation. Today, I'm a victor, not because I'm rich, but because I'm free. Free from debt, free from fear, free from the need to compromise my values for survival. So here's what I want to ask you. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from, what's your mason jar moment? What's the thing that knocked you down so hard you thought you'd never get up? Maybe you've been scammed like I was. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe your business failed. Maybe you're drowning in debt. Maybe you're 50 or 60 years old and feeling like it's too late to start over. Let me tell you something. It's not too late. It's never too late. As long as you're breathing, you have time to build something new. But you have to be willing to do it right. No shortcuts. No get-rich-quick schemes. No compromises with your integrity. Start where you are. Start with what you have. Even if it's just $20 and a skill. Even if it's just an idea and determination. Pay yourself first. Even if it's just $5 a week. Build the habit. Learn something new. Read books. Watch educational videos. Take free online courses. Knowledge is the only investment that never loses value. Find one person who needs what you can provide. Do an excellent job. Let them tell someone else. Build slowly, patiently, consistently. And most importantly, never ever compromises your integrity. Because once you do, you're building on sand. And sand can't support anything lasting. I didn't tell you my story to brag. I told you my story to prove that it's possible. That ordinary people, nurses, teachers, checkout clerks, postal workers, can build extraordinary things if they're willing to do the work. You don't need special talent. You don't need luck. You don't need a miracle. You just need patience, integrity, and the courage to keep going when everything you wants to quit. 10 years ago, I had $2,347 and no hope. Today, I have more than I ever dreamed possible. Not because I'm special, but because I made different choices. You can make those choices too. Start today. Start small. Start right. And 10 years from now, you'll look back at this moment and thank you for beginning. I want to hear from you. What's your story? Have you ever been scammed or faced financial devastation? How did you recover? What did you learn? And if you're in that dark place right now, if you're staring at your own empty savings account wondering how you'll survive, please leave a comment. Tell me what you're facing. Because of this community, we're here for each other. We lift each other up. Some of you watching this have wisdom to share. Some of you have encouragement to offer. Some of you are proof that recovery is possible. Share your stories in the comments. You never know whose life you might change. And please, if this story resonated with you, if it gave you even a small spark of hope, subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to keep sharing stories like this. Stories of real people who overcame real challenges. Stories that prove that your circumstances don't define your choices do. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, there's another woman sitting at her kitchen table, counting her last few dollars, wondering if she'll ever be okay. Let's tell her, yes, you will be okay. More than okay, if you're willing to do the work. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write yours. And remember, it's never too late. You're never too old. You're never too broke. You're only defeated if you quit. So don't quit. Start building something beautiful. Build something real. Build something that matters. One small step at a time.